Hidden Aqueduct. This morning we are going to follow the curve of an ancient waterway that slips in and out of the earth. Sometimes a stone spine on the hillside, sometimes a shadow under fields. We will walk beside it from the first bright bend above town to the last quiet arch near the sea, learning its turns by sight, sound, and touch. The day begins at a small square where the cobblestones are still damp from the street washer, and the air smells faintly of soap and early bread. A low wall borders the square, and above it the first arches rise, pale limestone laid in steady courses, each block fitted to the next like teeth. The sky is a clear blue that makes every edge look sharper, even the worn ones rounded by centuries of thumbs and rain. Swallows draw thin lines under the arches, stitching one span to another with their flight. A cat sits on the warm lid of a metal utility box and blinks, unimpressed by the birds, content with heat rising through its pores. A faded plaque says that water once ran here for the baths and fountains of the old town, and later for laundry troughs and garden basins. The stone under the plaque shows a groove where many fingers have traced the same words. You set your palm there now, and the groove guides your hand as if it knows the way. When you step underneath the first arch, the square softens behind you, and the quiet understone air wraps around your shoulders like shade. The aqueduct curves left, skirting a bakery where racks of round loaves cool in the doorway. Steam beads on the window, and the baker's apprentice leans out to let the heat escape, resting his elbows on the sill. He watches the street with the patient calm of someone whose work began before dawn, and now slows to a steady rhythm. A handcart rattles past with a crate of oranges, their skins scuffed and shining, a few leaves still attached to their stems. The cart's wheels make a hollow sound on the stones, a dull drumbeat that echoes beneath the arch. The apprentice tosses a crumb to a sparrow, then another, until a neat row of birds forms along the gutter, like small grey stones that blink. The arch shadow divides the street exactly in half, one side bright, one side cool, and your feet choose the cool without thinking. A trickle runs in a narrow channel beside the wall. Not the ancient flow, but a modern guide. Rainwater caught by a new gutter that remembers the old path. The sound of it is light and constant, almost like a steady breath keeping time for your steps. A bicycle bell rings politely and fades toward the market. Past the bakery, the arches lower, and then the waterway disappears into a bank of grass. A strip of shallow steps continues in its place, cut into the slope, marked with a thin line of sedge where the dampness holds. The stones of the steps are flecked with mica that catches the sun like a scatter of salt. A green lizard stops midway and lifts its head, throat pulsing, then darts between two stones so quickly you were left watching only the spot where it vanished. The path bends along a garden fence, woven from thin willow rods, each joint tied with darker bark that has dried into a clean knot. Behind the fence, rows of beans climb twine strings, and white blossoms hang like small flags that nod whenever the breeze turns down the hill. A woman in a blue cap waters the base of each plant slowly, moving with the ease of someone who knows the exact amount each stem prefers. She glances up at the path and tips the metal spout in greeting without speaking. The trickle in the gutter grows softer as grass thickens, and the only sound left is the light swish of your shoes on grit. Around the next bend, the aqueduct reappears as a tunnel mouth only shoulder high, lined with fitted stone blocks that carry a faint, cool scent. The air coming out of the tunnel smells like wet limestone and the green of ferns. A thin thread of water slides along the bottom, clear enough to show every pebble and the shadow of a beetle that floats and spins. 2 old coins lie in a shallow eddy, darkened to the colour of tea, their numbers blurred, but still readable with a squint. Past the mouth, the tunnel roof rises and splits into daylight again, and the channel runs within a shallow trough lined with lime plaster, smoothed by centuries of flow. The plaster has hairline cracks that look like dried riverbeds on a map, crisscrossing toward the same vanishing point. At one section, a repair patch stands out in a different shade, newer, the brush marks still faintly visible. A honeybee lands on the damp edge to drink, its legs, dusty with yellow pollen, that turns to a deeper gold when the wings hum. You step aside to give it room, and watch the bee lift and angle away over a slope of time. A stoned stair climbs beside the trough to a vantage above the olive terraces. The sky widens step by step until it fills your whole view. A bright field where the sun stands a little off-center and seems to lean toward you. Underfoot, the steps have shallow basins scooped in their centers by many heels, and each basin is its own tiny horizon, reflecting a patch of blue. Dry grass leans against the stair edges, and when you brush it with your ankle, it leaves seeds that feel like small commas. At the top, a narrow parapet runs along the channel, so you can walk on the spine of the waterway and see both sides at once. To the right, the town falls away in layers of tile roofs, the red uneven and warm. To the left, the hillside lifts into groves of olive trees that wear silver on one side of each leaf and deep green on the other. A man in a sun hat shakes a branch with a long pole wrapped in felt to spare the bark, and olives tap softly into a net stretched between stakes. He pauses to wave with the pole and returns to the branch with the slow, unhurried rhythm of trees. A dog with white eyelashes lies in the shade of the net and rolls onto its back, paws folded loosely, belly exposed to any passing breeze. The channel's thin flow keeps whispering, as if reminding you that even on a ridge, water moves where the makers told it to go. Another curve brings a series of tall arches stepping across a ravine. The columns are simple and strong, their joints keyed with small stones shaped like wedges to lock each course. A faint white lichen grows on the windward side, and on one arch, a date is chiselled along the edge. The numbers softened, but still solid. Down in the ravine, fig trees have colonized the damp, their roots gripping rocks, leaves throwing sharp shadows on the soil. A pair of goats works along the base, tearing at ivy with steady bites. their bells clinking at different pitches, so you can tell them apart with your eyes closed. A young herder sits on a flat stone near the water and sews a tear in a cloth bag, pulling the needle free with his teeth now and then when the thread snags. He looks up as you cross and gives a quick nod, a friendly acknowledgement between people following the same line for different reasons. The passage over the arches is narrow, with a low rail polished by palms, and your hand finds the smoothness without searching. Beneath, the shade is cool and deep enough to keep one puddle unbroken since yesterday's irrigation spill. The aqueduct soon ducks under a farm lane, and for a while its route is marked by a double row of poplars, whose leaves show their pale undersides when the wind turns. The lane smells of dry dust and crushed fennel seeds, with a sweet note that rises wherever tractor tires have cracked stems. A red tractor moves slowly along a far field, wheels biting into soil that rolls in tidy ridges behind it. A boy rides, standing on the step, one hand on the fender, face serious with the responsibility of balancing while his parent drives. A dog trots behind and then ahead, undecided, tongue swinging, declaring the lane safe through sheer repetition. On a fence post, a blackbird throws its voice across the fields with a clean whistle that seems to carve the sky into clear sections. A mail van passes and stops by a box nailed to an old gate. The driver folds a newspaper and tucks it under a rock so it will not blow away. The poplar leaves shake, flash light, then settle again, and the line of their trunks guides your eyes forward until the next stonework rises. Here the builders cut the channel into the hillside itself, and the exposed wall shows layers like pages tilted at an angle. Pebbles are suspended in the clay strata, each one a small button sunk halfway in, some cracked to halves by time. Ferns occupy every seam where moisture lingers, their fronds like hands, placed flat on the stone to steady the slope. A small barred window opens from a maintenance niche, and the iron is cold when your knuckles brush it. Inside the niche, a wooden rake leans in the corner, and a metal sieve hangs from a nail. Tools set aside by someone who knows how to clean silt without breaking the plaster lining. A folded rag on the sill dries in a stiff shape that records the twist of the last ring. A wasp steps along the iron bar and cleans its antennae with brisk strokes, as if preparing for a meeting. The air through the niche is cooler than outside. The difference of a single breath, but noticeable on your wrist. The path widens, and the gravel is mixed with rounded streamstones that make a bright, clean sound underfoot. Ahead, a little bridge crosses the channel, where a footpath from the village meets your route. The bridge has low sides, cut from a single slab, edges softened by the rub of baskets and elbows. On the far side, a woman with a straw hat rests 2 pails on the parapet and wipes her forehead with the back of her hand, leaving a pale line through dust. She keeps 1 pail for her own garden and tips the other carefully into a trough for 3 ducks waiting in a row, their necks stretching as they watch the falling water. The ducks drink, then dip their bills and throw water over their backs with the quick shrugging motion that leaves tight beads sliding down feathers. A little girl, perhaps her granddaughter, counts to 20 while the ducks rinse, and when she reaches 20, she claps, satisfied with the time kept. A man comes down the footpath with a stack of empty crates tied with twine, the twine pinched between his thumb and the crate so the knot won't slip. He nods to the woman, to you, and to the ducks, as if each is part of the same appointment. You step aside to let them pass, and your sleeve picks up a faint smell of straw that stays with you for a few steps, like a travel companion. The aqueduct runs hidden again, under a long meadow dotted with yellow hawkbit and small blue chicory blooms. The builders left markers where it passes, square stones set flush with the ground, each with a hole drilled through the center, so a rod could test the depth when needed. A family picnics by one of the markers, their blanket patterned in red checks that make the grass look greener by contrast. The father slices tomatoes with a small pocket knife and places them in a row, seeds shining. And the mother tucks them into bread with cheese and basil leaves. A toddler wanders toward the marker and taps the hole with a fingertip, then looks around to see if anyone saw this discovery. Someone's radio plays a quiet song that leans on a simple melody no one listens to closely, but everyone keeps time with. A single cloud crosses the sun, and the meadow breathes out a cooler smell, sweet and a little wet, as if the grass has a memory for shade. A pair of butterflies hover and pivot near your knees, refuse to land, and then are gone, as if changed into light. The buried waterway still directs your steps, even when sight loses it. The land itself carries a hint of its curve. At a low rise, the aqueduct returns, lifted on shorter arches, as if it is remembering how to be above ground. A small wayside shrine sits tucked into the outer wall, not religious anymore, now a niche for useful things. Someone has set inside it a spool of twine, a magnet for stray nails, and a clay cup without a handle. The cup has a hairline crack that has been mended with a narrow ridge of metal varnish. A stitch of goldish resin that follows the break like a drawn line. A carpenter pauses here and sips water from his own bottle, then uses the niche to set his pencils in order. Graphite tips aligned like little roofs. He tests a chisel on the edge of the parapet, the steel making a bright sound that rings once and fades. When he leaves, he turns the spool so the twine's loose end faces out for the next person. A tablet on the wall records a repair made in a particular year after a winter of heavy rain. And below the tablet, a long streak shows where that rain once ran. You trail a finger along the streak, and your fingertip comes away chalky. Further on, the aqueduct shares its path with a line of plane trees, whose bark peels in plates the colour of cream and tan. The bark litters the ground in curled flakes, thin as eggshells. And when you step on them, they give a soft, crisp sound. A school group walks toward you in pairs, holding hands loosely, each pair slightly out of step with the next. A long wave that moves down the line. The teacher points to the arches and explains in a steady voice how the builders kept the channel level, even as the land rose and fell, using sighting rods and water in tubes. One child looks most at the pigeons, another at the plucked bark, another at the ants that have found a line of sugar where someone spilled peach syrup. The smallest child turns around to walk backward for a few steps and watches the archers chase him, then laughs and returns to forward. The teacher smiles without breaking the explanation, a skill learned from many such walks. A custodian follows at a distance with a canvas bag, picking up the odd bottle and turning it upside down to let any last drops fall before he adds it to the bag. He stops to tighten a loose rail bolt with a small wrench, checks it with a tug, and continues without fuss. The channel leads into a small walled garden that once housed a settling basin. The basin is empty now, cleaned and left as a square of pale stone, with bench-height edges, good for sitting or placing baskets. Lavender bushes circle the space, and bees move between them with a seriousness that looks like focus. A gardener kneels by one bush and clips spent stems into a bucket. Each cut a tiny click. The clipped stems fill the air with a fresh smell that lies between green and floral, clean enough to make your mouth water. A terracotta tile near the basin has a footprint pressed into it from when it was still soft. Toes splayed a little. The foot must have belonged to a child who could not resist stepping there. A pair of doves perches on the edge of the wall, feet set far apart, heads bobbing in small, exact motions as they inventory what the garden offers. On the far side, a metal gate stands open, its paint worn to a thin line on the latch from the number of times it has been pushed. You run your fingers over that worn strip and feel the groove that hands make in metal when they share a path over years. Past the garden, the stones turn a slightly warmer colour, more orange mixed into the cream, showing a quarry change. Each block carries the shallow arc of a mason's chisel, the arcs overlapping like scales. Some have a letter carved in the edge, different hands marking their work. the alphabet scattered along the run. A small drain pierces the wall every dozen steps. A round mouth lined with lead. And from one drain, you hear the faint, constant tick of water falling far inside the hill. You place your ear near the drain and find the sound steady as a clock in another room. A cyclist eases past with wide tires and a woven basket fixed to the front, its wicker creaking a little under the weight of a loaf and an egg carton. He coasts for a while, 1 foot free, examining the chisel arcs with the same slow attention you gave them. A breeze lifts the edge of his shirt and shows a pale stripe where a strap has been. A quiet record of other rides. He raises 2 fingers from the bar in greeting, and the basket creaks again when he resumes pedalling uphill.